The way of life in cities we call civilization, and civilization is thus foundationally characterized by people and resources moving into urban centers or cities. Therefore, the core matter of the city is going to be, by definition, overshoot of the landmass.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome. I think may I invite you to a very stimulating session. And I think all of us know very well how climate change is affecting us. Actually, it will be affecting us in the coming years and decades. All of us know that. So it's like, to me, it's really a pertinent issue I have to dwell on. At the same time, to help us ourselves to how we can do better in the coming years and decades, not only for us, also for our future generations. Without further ado, may I just start the session with the first one is via Zoom. Professor Layne Hartsell from the Department of Philosophy, Chulalongkorn University. This is via Zoom. Yeah, please.
Good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, please.
It's clear? Okay. I want to check that first. Well, good afternoon from Koyai bioregion here just north of Bangkok. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it to the city today. First, I want to thank Dr. Kringsek and the board at the Nation Building Institute, good friends of mine, folks that I've been probably known for about 3 or 4, maybe 5 years now, actually. And also for other members of the institutes of the ASEAN, or Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and then also to the chair of this section, Dr. Morshid Ahmad from the Asia Institute of Technology and other panelists. You had asked me to give some brief thoughts today on cities and pollution, particularly concerning bioethics and the elderly. And I want to first kind of look at developing an understanding and then move on to a more solutions-based approach. So the way of life in cities we call civilization, and civilization is thus foundationally characterized by people and resources moving into urban centers or cities. Therefore, the core matter of the city is going to be, by definition, overshoot of the landmass, so the location as you bring in resources, people, and so forth from the hinterlands. So the hinterlands outside of the city, and today these are, of course, globally. The problem here is one of catastrophic extraction, and that's going to require a lot of fossil fuels. So I'm going to move in the direction of climate change and then go into some of the comments on public health. This particular culture has been around for 5,000 years, beginning at Europe, as I've talked about before in other lectures. But today, since around 1800, and then in the mid-19th century with Paris, London and then Paris, and then up into New York, and then globally, Tokyo, and so forth, we have a city network system. I call it, these are megapolis, right? These massive cities. And I call this a megapolitron, which is an acceleration of this city system and extraction that pretty much occurred around 1950. So you start to see a massive upscaling of the cities. And then if you look at the measurements from NOAA in Boulder, Colorado, we can see where they measured the Earth system. We can see the graphs going almost directly up since around 1950. So it goes back a long time, but I'm speaking more or less along the lines of the last 70 or 80 years. And this extraction is causing these identifiable problems that you hear about, which we call climate change, which is a kind of constellation of a lot of different problems. But to the scientists, this is alarming, and then over the last probably, I don't know, 15 years, it's become a bit of an alarming situation in the public, but it's been around for a while, obviously. Droughts, forest fires, and so forth. And you also hear about pollution. And I have this picture I took off of my phone this morning from one of those little apps. And this is of New Delhi in India that I'm going to talk about as we get going here on the pollution levels in these places. Blue in this one is like the extreme, you should say bad if you want to call it. And then as you get down to yellow, this is very poor air conditions, and then the green is good. So there's certain kinds of outcomes that we could expect from this massive geophysical system. So the geophysical system are the oceans and the climate and all of that, and that has an effect down to the level that we're at, of course, in this tiny thin layer around the Earth. And when we talk about weather, we're not talking about climate. So weather is a part of all of this, but that's a very small part. So when we get from these big geophysical systems down to the level of where we live, we look at like public health and what's happening. And a lot of I've looked at some of the other panelists here and some of their work and some of their excellent work on some of these that are more specific. But I'm going to try to give a generalization and go down into a specific paper. Most people today live in cities, so it's about 58% of, maybe after the pandemic, it dropped off. Like pandemics, people tend to leave cities. So you look at ancient Rome or, in Europe and other places. When you have a pandemic, people flee the cities, right? But I think they're probably coming back. And the data that we have is probably about 58% live in cities, but the trajectory, which is the problem, is that we're expecting this to go to maybe 70% within a couple decades, meaning these mega cities are just growing. Like Lagos in Nigeria, that place could be 50 million people before long. Pearl River Valley that I've talked about, Pearl River Delta, sorry, in China. So this morning I looked at the Lancet, and I got one last paper that says that more than 80% of people live in cities in the rich areas already. So this massive urbanization that's going on. And when we talk about human health and animals and the biosphere, there's a kind of metabolism that happens in the city. So there's this kind of influx of or bringing in of the extracted resources. And then there's processing going on, and then there's also waste. And particularly with this particular photo that I show you of New Delhi and Lahore and Pakistan and India, you can see, we can measure some of that waste coming off. Now, this is just an app that you get on your phone, but the scientists will have a lot more specific, precise data. Now, this pollution can be in the form of heavy metals like cadmium, lead, so forth. And even some of the lead that we have in the environment today goes back to the mines of Rome. So we're still dealing with pollution that goes back to mining 2,000, 2,500 years ago at Rome, or the mines of Laurion in Athens, near Athens. And so specifically, the air pollution that the paper that I looked at for this talk today comes from 2017. There's a reason why I chose something almost 10 years ago, by Dr. Stephen Holgate at the Royal College of Physicians and Pediatrics, that they say now the evidence is overwhelming at that time that air pollution is not just something that, you feel irritation in your nasopharyngeal area when you're in the city and maybe cough a little bit or maybe some wheezing, but it's a life course issue, they say, and it affects us from conception to death, impairing, I'm quoting, fetal development, stunting childhood lung growth, increasing the risk of asthma, stroke, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and even dementia. And this year I have a chapter in a textbook of nanoscience coming out about dementia and some of those finer mechanics, but overall I've been looking into pollution in cities. And I want to begin by just asking a simple question: is when did you last think about the last breath that you took? It's an automatic process, and you don't really think about it until maybe there's a diesel car in front of you and you have to breathe it or something like this. We breathe about 20,000 times a day, and that air sustains us, but also paradoxically, it's become a major health threat in the 21st century. The reason I chose 10 years ago is around that time, we also thought that if we were to stop all fossil fuel emissions at that time, that the levels of carbon dioxide and so forth would go up in the atmosphere continually as if a momentum had already been established. So the conditions I'm describing in cities from this paper back around 2017 are continuing on a trajectory right now. So it's this trajectory that I want to talk about. It's not, they talk about the Anthropocene, but the geologists say that the Anthropocene is not so identifiable right now. It takes a long time, but we can see a trajectory towards this human influence, these human systems influence, the urban systems on the natural system. Okay, the information from the UK says that there are 40,000 early deaths each year. That's just in the UK alone, and up to about 9 million globally. I see figures of 7 to 9 million, and these are conservative because these are what we can measure, but as you can ascertain, that this is very complex stuff to get at. Undoubtedly, the numbers are much higher because there are other kinds of pollutants going on. But it said the World Health Organization says that this is the single largest environmental risk to human health. And if we take Dr. Holgate's paper from 2017 and look at the WHO and then the State of Global Air Report, this is an interactive website, it brings into one place this comprehensive analysis of the levels and trends in air quality and health for every country in the world. So it's an integral website. It's produced annually by the Health Effects Institute and the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluations and the Global Burden of Disease, very important studies or entities for study. And they're a source of objective, high quality and comparable air quality data and information. But this crisis, of course, remains unseen or invisible, they say, and particles and gases emitted from the cars, like these fine nanoparticles, buses, industrial plants, household products such as tasteless and odorless products that are used in the household, often are unnoticed, and yet they're far from harmless. Ultrafine particles, many will know the PM 2.5 because they talk about that a lot in Bangkok and in Asian cities, and then PM 0.1, which is much smaller. These can penetrate deeper into the lungs when you're breathing, and they can enter the bloodstream. Once they do that, they can get into the blood vessels, causing arteriosclerosis and basically kind of like plumbing, like blocking the plumbing, you could say. So arteriosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, and then affecting the organ systems, but also has effects on areas like dementia in the brain and so forth. I'm not qualified to talk on that right now, but anyway, these pollutants are not just outside, but they're also inside. So as people started to seal off the windows and the doors to have better energy use or reduce energy, then the air quality becomes a lot worse. Just to note that 1 micron is a millionth of a meter, so 1 times 10 to the negative 6. And I'll give you a couple things here. So like a fine sand on the beach, a little piece of sand on the beach is about 90 micrometers. Hair is 50 to 70 micrometers. And then going down to PM 10 or less than 10 micrometers, that's dust or pollen or mold. Going down to PM 2.5, that's combustion particles, like nanoparticles coming from cars and combustion engines, organic compounds and metals. So that kind of took you down, getting closer into like this nano level. And when you get down very small, that's when it can get into the bloodstream. If you're healthy, the physicians that I consulted said that you can usually deal with this, but for children and elderly people, either, like in the child, the organs are smaller, they don't have the ability to do detox for their body to get rid of these toxins. And then for the elderly, as the organs go into less robust operations, or they have other, concomitant problems, then they become susceptible. In 2010, over 80% of London's most polluted schools were also in deprived areas, and we now have a generation of children whose schools are near traffic junctions, where idling engines during the school run are degrading their health, and cognitive development. I keep putting cognitive development in because we're seeing some evidence that looks scary to me, this needs to be dealt with, basically. Places where elders are located also ought to be considered with the same concerns. In response to all of this, Dr. Holgate and colleagues issued 14 recommendations. I'm not going to go through all of them.
Dr. Layne, can you finish in 1 minute, please? Please finish in 1 minute, please.
1 minute, yes. I'm not going to go through all of those, but there are 14 there, and I'll put this on my Facebook page after the talk. But the argument is that it's not just that you can just treat one person. There's a necessity for the medical experts to actually do intervention, of course. Biotechnology, surgery, pharmacology. At the same time, there has to be the systemic aspect, public health, politics, and so forth, because these systems are so big, dealing with pollution and all of that. But there's one study I found that came out of France that was really interesting. And it was done by Pierre Sicard, where they used lasers across cities that had already put in canopies, tree canopies, covering parts of the city. And at around 30% now they did 744 European cities, but they found at about 30% of canopy coverage that they found a reduction in premature deaths. And this was done over 20 years back, the last decade, and it ended there. And there's more studies following up. So I want to end with a positive note that we do know what to do, biochemically, medically, public health, and also the policies are in place. There's the UN SDGs, which are actually quite weak, and they aren't finding much success, but these can be applied on the larger scale. So let me finish there, and I'll take any questions if you have any. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Layne. Thank you. To save time, may I straight go to Dr. Gary Hawk? So please hold on your questions, comments. We will have after all the presentations. Dr. Gary Hawk of Stockholm Environment Institute. Please, 10 minutes, please.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to come here. I just have a short presentation I would like to share, if I may. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see that. Thank you very much. Please.
Okay, thank you. So I'd just like to talk about some of the challenges of an aging population and climate change. Just to let you know, I'm from the Stockholm Environment Institute. We're an international environment and development institute. We do have an office in Bangkok, in Thailand there, but also I'm from the York office in the UK. And we've been looking at this intersection between aging and climate change back in 2008 to understand what does it mean for older people. As you probably are all aware, we have a global aging population. By 2050, this will represent people aged over 60, about 22%. It's going to double from 2015. And most of the aging population and the growth in older people will be in lower middle income countries. And these countries are historically have a low responsibility for emissions. In the Asia Pacific region, we see that the higher proportion by 2050 in terms of an aging population will be China, India, Japan, and Indonesia. So we have an aging population. At the same time, we have a changing climate. The frequency and magnitude of extreme weather events are increasing. If you look at this data from extreme events in 2024, there's extreme weather events, heat waves. They were in Japan, Australia, Iran, flooding in Italy, and storms. So an aging population, a changing climate. We know that as people grow older, older people are disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change and extreme weather events. And so this comes back to a kind of human rights issue for older people and climate change. Climate change impacts whether it's heat waves, flooding, storms, all aspects of human rights of older people. So obviously immediate impacts are their effects on their health and life and well-being in terms of, for example, their safety in a storm, or in terms of, we heard about more extreme air pollution or a heat wave. In terms of mobility, we're also aware that in evacuation situations, older people are affected in terms of being able to be evacuated, say, from a flooded area. Housing, some housings are ill-prepared for extreme weather events, and that also can affect how older people are able to be protected from the weather and heat. It can affect food and access to food and nutrition, water and sanitation when it comes to drought and dehydration and infectious diseases, cultural traditions. All this puts a strain on social protection and care and support, and also it impacts livelihoods, for especially those livelihoods are affected by climate change, such as agriculture and informal labour. So we have an aging population, we have a changing climate, we have the extreme weather events and the increased frequency and magnitudes and impacting the life and well-being of older people. Last year at the Stockholm Environment Institute, we did a number of regional dialogues around the world, and we held one in the Asia Pacific region. And these are some of the issues that when we were discussing about this intersection between aging and climate that came up in our discussion, in terms of we're seeing that we are already living with the reality of a changing climate. In this discussion, people were mentioning about slum areas in Dhaka and how they're dealing with extreme heat and no cooling or healthcare. In Nepal, about elders having to be displaced from floods due to extreme flooding. In terms of the challenges, it's a big challenge for urban planning and the disaster response to include older people, and also how it's affecting especially women in informal labour because they're excluded from pension systems. At the same time, it's not all negative. Older people have a lived experience, they have enormous wealth and knowledge and indigenous knowledge to share, and we know that older people are taking part in climate action. So here we saw elders in Nepal managing resilient traditional irrigation systems, or in South Korea, older people who have filed a constitutional petition for climate action. So when we look at older people and climate change and the impact climate change will have on older people, often we look at older people just as being vulnerable, a casualty of climate change, but we would like to be more holistic in the approach. Obviously, an aging population will contribute to CO2 emissions from their lifestyle choices, from their healthcare, but equally they'll be impacted disproportionately from the impact of climate change and extreme weather events. But at the same time, we have a growing population with enormous knowledge, a wealth of experience, who can have a role in climate action and be potential change makers. So in terms of what we need to do in moving forward for a more sustainable, climate, more sustainable society, we need to reduce the contribution we all make, especially older people, to climate change and the greenhouse gas emissions. We need to protect better older people from the impact of climate change, but also mobilize their expertise and knowledge. And just to say that in terms of opportunities, as I said, for climate action, they have shared experience, they're trusted voices in the community, they have that traditional ecological knowledge, and it's great for participating in intergenerational learning and mentoring. But what needs to change is that we need to recognize that older people are not just victims of climate change, but there are actors, for change, that they can help develop this intergenerational learning and understanding and help support community-based adaptation. But a key part of challenge is ageism in policy, media, and advocacy. So if I have to say what the key takeaways from what I'm trying to say today is that aging and climate change intersect daily. Older people face unique risks, but they're often left behind from the climate planning. They're not just vulnerable, they're caregivers, knowledge holders, and community leaders. And so they do have a role to play in climate action. Most emergency systems and funding mechanisms are not age inclusive. And when we talk about resilience, and we heard earlier about air pollution and how it impacts from an early age, is that resilience needs to be built over the life course. So it's about developing, clean cities with cities that will promote healthy cities for older people and younger people, and safe cities. So it's looking at building that resilience over the life course, so that when you get to old age, you're able to deal with some of the impacts of, for example, climate change or from other environmental kinds of risks. And then for global action, we need to include the voices of older people is really important. So as I said, priorities are protect vulnerable groups, reduce emissions equitably, but also mobilize older people's agency and wisdom in this, as we move into this period of climate change and the impact that will have on all our lives. That's a quick quick run through some of the issues around aging and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. May I now request to play the video by Professor Jonathan Michie from the Oxford University? The video. There is a video by Professor Jonathan Michie. May I request to play it now? Then we go for the on-site presentations.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Michie. I'm the Professor of Innovation and Knowledge Exchange at the University of Oxford, and it's a really great pleasure and privilege to be able to send my very best wishes to you and the work that you're doing at this conference. I very much would have liked to have been with you, but unfortunately I have duties in Oxford that I have to see to, but I do hope to be able to work with you in the future on a number of areas of work that I will describe briefly now. Firstly, I should introduce myself. I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Oxford, and I'm President of one of the University of Oxford's colleges, one of the graduate colleges, Kellogg College. It's the most international of the University of Oxford's 39 colleges, and it's committed, my college is committed to the principle of lifelong learning. So we have students of all ages, not just in their 20s, but also their 30s, 40s, sometimes in their 70s, 80s, or even 90s, studying for degrees, postgraduate degrees, master's degrees, doctoral degrees at the University of Oxford. So I want to firstly say that I think the topics you're tackling, discussing in your conference are absolutely central. They could not be more important or timely. Issues of peace, development and nation building, and the focus on peace in an aging world. I'd like to say something about the conflict with nature and navigating climate change and challenges for the elderly around that. So I'll say something briefly on climate change itself, where I chair a commission at Oxford that I would invite you to participate in. And secondly, on challenges for the elderly, and particularly the importance of lifelong learning, where I'd like to report some work which is just being published, which has been undertaken with the support and help of the Nation Building Institute. So firstly, on climate change, one of the most important issues that we need to tackle, that we need to make progress on, is getting better reporting of what the emissions are from companies, organisations, countries, cities. At the moment, the reporting that is done tends to be based just on industry averages rather than what the company or the organisation is actually doing in detail. And the argument, briefly, is this, that all companies have to be audited for their financial activities, and in the same way they should be audited for the activities that they're undertaking which result in carbon emissions, so that there can be an accurate recording of those and reporting of it. I should say that that auditing of actual activities could and should and would be done under conditions of strict confidentiality, so other companies don't get information of what each company is doing. But if you are the head of a major company, then you will know that while you may wish to report accurately the carbon emissions that your company or your organisation is responsible for, it is actually very difficult to get that detailed information. As I say, the reports tend to be based just on industry averages of what the sort of activities that your company undertake would be responsible for on average. What we need is to look at the software in companies that control, record all the operations that companies undertake, and that will enable an accurate, verifiable reporting of what was actually done and, crucially, what the carbon emissions of each company is. And that will then allow us to track that over time and will help companies to reduce their carbon emissions, which at the moment is difficult for them to do because they're not actually sure exactly what their emissions are. So I'm chairing a commission, the Oxford Commission on Sustainability Data, because the purpose of the commission is to promulgate this new methodology of getting more accurate data about the emissions that determine climate change. We've got a major city in Brazil has asked to be part of the commission so that we can measure the emissions that that city is responsible for, which will help them to try and reduce their emissions and therefore reduce their costs, improve their efficiency, improve the well-being of the people who live there. So whether you're involved in an organisation that would like to know more accurately what your emissions are, or if you're involved in a city and would like to have a better picture of the emissions your city is responsible for, do let me know, and we'll be very pleased to involve you in the work of Oxford's Commission on Sustainability Data. Now, on lifelong learning and challenges for the elderly, the key point is that all of us should have the ability, indeed the right, to access education at different aspects and at different times of our life. While we're working, that will be beneficial to the economy. But whether we're still working or not, it would be important to improving our contribution, the effectiveness of our contribution to society, our integration and involvement in family life, and indeed individual well-being. There's been a major global study into this issue about learning and to what extent it needs to be lifelong, with the help of the Nation Building Institute, and this is just being published now, a report on making lifelong learning central to university strategy, which the work behind this report interviewed more than 1,000 employers globally, more than 10,000 learners globally, and it came through the message, conclusion, came through loud and clear that education is increasingly being seen as having to be a lifelong endeavour. Education needs to be recognised as a lifelong endeavour. Secondly, both the employers, the organisations and the learners reported that they thought universities could and should play a central role in this lifelong learning endeavour alongside other providers of education and learning. But thirdly, and this is particularly important to me as a member of the University of Oxford, both employers and learners said that universities could and should do more themselves to change what they do to make their learning more effective, not just for people in their 20s, but also in their 30s, 40s and 70s, 80s or 90s sometimes. And in this regard, I chair an organisation called the Universities Association for Lifelong Learning, which I'm very pleased to say the Nation Building Institute is a member of. And we'll be using the results of this research to persuade universities, firstly, to improve their own mechanisms to delivering education to people of all ages, but also to collaborate with employers, government and others to ensure that there's joined up collaboration between organisations to make sure that education is available. And if you and your organisation would like to become involved in the work of the Universities Association for Lifelong Learning, which the Nation Building Institute already is, then we would be very pleased to welcome you into that as well. So I hope to work with you on one or both of these initiatives, the Commission on Sustainability Data and the Universities Association for Lifelong Learning. But in the meantime, very best wishes for your conference and all your good work and endeavours. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. You can see the National Building Institute also there with them. It's really good news. I wish you all the best, and I think more of you will be interested to join that. Now we go to the face-to-face phase of the presentation. May I go to the first, the on-site presenter, Mr. Thibault Danju? Yeah? Yes. Yes. You want to show that?
Can I stand there? So thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. And thank you, Professor Krinsak. And it's my first time to be in Bangkok. But many times I've been to Chiang Mai University for the sustainable development. And before I became a professor, I used to be a program officer at the International Center on Small Hydropower under the auspices of UNIDO. So I spent many times stationed in Africa and Latin America. And this morning and also this afternoon, I was also quite impressed by some new innovative ideas from professors like GIA, because I was a program officer of those 18 programs or projects. I was quite familiar with the EIA, SRA, now ESGs like that. But GIA, that's my first time to hear about that. It's quite important, I think, because during my some execution in African countries, even nowadays for under the framework of BRI, there are some projects invested in Africa. There are different, I think, risks and impacts to the people, particularly for the aged people. They are quite particular. We must be very cautious and be careful. And because of the limited time, here just a few pictures. My years in Africa and some UN program and projects over the past 20 years. And first of all, I would like to make it clear that climate change is really a big human security factor. And human security is, I think, not new concept, but we came back to like 1994 later in 2004, this definition is quite clear. There's 3 dimensions for human security. Why it is called human security? It must be human and people-centered. That's a very important thing. And there are 3 dimensions we call security: free from fear, free from want, and free to live in dignity. But nowadays, I think many people, particularly for the aged people, they have suffered a lot of conflicts and even wars and poverty. And so I make it clear that climate change, as one of the SDG, UN SDG, like UN SDG 13, is quite important and correlated with human security. And even no poverty and these kind of things are quite important. China, I think, also contributed a lot for no poverty, this kind of SDG 1 and SDG 2. And even for SDG 8, decent work, I think because I'm from Hangzhou, the city of the headquarters of Alibaba, Jack Ma used to be a symbol of the SDG 8. But nowadays, as we look at these diagrams from the recent report of the UNESCO in 2025, because this SDG to 2030, total of the 17 SDG goals are lagged behind according to the original plan. And till now, even to 2030, there's no one single SDG goals could be implemented, according to the original plan. But for the Asian Pacific areas, SDG 13, climate action, is really we must pay attention to, because it's lagged behind much. And nowadays, 5 years ago, because of the pandemic, most of the countries, including China, also are facing the very bad situation of economic development. Though we have around more than 40 years of the very fast economic development in China, but nowadays we still face a lot of challenges, particularly for the aging people. So the second, I would like to make it clear that climate change impacted a lot of people, but particularly for the aging societies. There are some scholars, they proposed the analysis or assessment structures for assess the implementation of the climate change on aging people, like cultural and even the psychological, mental problems like that. And of course, extreme weather threats particularly goes to the elderly. But nowadays, in China, I think we have a lot of such kind of we call the social care centers, also elder care centers. We have different models. The first one is traditional, the family-based family care mode. This is a traditional. Each country, I think, have this kind of traditional elderly care mode. The second is community-based, and I also here show you some take pictures like the digital psychological service and healthcare platform. Because nowadays is a digitalization age. We use a lot of such kind of mental health technologies, and even for like a remote platform, we can monitor the health level of, particularly the mental level health of the aging people. In China, particularly in my city, Hangzhou is called the capital of the digital city in China. And here, I just would like to show you. See, I took these pictures in Hangzhou. I visited different these kind of elderly care centers. They are very good but expensive elderly care centers. But it's quite expensive. Only those with good pension, they can enjoy these kind of resources. But nowadays, like in Hangzhou, in some older community, the elderly people, they can also enjoy their own style of enjoyment and entertainment, like play cards in the park. And each weekends, I can see a lot of these kind of elderly people. They can get together by our very beautiful West Lake. They sing together and play together like that. And nowadays, the local governments, they pay a lot of attention and invest a lot, like to renew and change the old factories, like this picture shows, these kind of factories to become a new cultural centers to entertain the older people. But I think the financing issue is also very important challenge. Yes. So I would like to conclude that, yes, like reforming and collaboration is quite important, particularly among the different stakeholders. But the quite important thing and the difficult thing is who makes the first step. Because climate change and also provide these kind of resources and service for the aging society needs the collective action. But the collective action is quite difficult. I think we need different sectors, the industries, universities, and think tanks, and also different stakeholders. So I think from this conference, I learned a lot from professor, and here you really invite a lot of stakeholders, different stakeholders, even the different religious groups coming here and get together here. We can have different dialogues and to provide good platforms. In my understanding, for my trip and visit, it's like a pilot project. I would like to establish in collaboration relationship with Professor Krinsenga and NBI here. And there's a lot of challenges and also opportunities. In China, elderly care now seems sometimes a big money industry. So some association and even enterprises, they will input a lot. But it's not only business. It's also quite important, the public wellness. Yes, a lot of people should get together here and join together. And we need in collaboration. Yes, I just stop here because of the time. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you very much. Excellent. I think please hold on your questions, comments after the next presentation, the last one. Maybe you can start to save time. Yeah. Can you use mine?
No? Yes. I don't have a presentation, so I think everything has been said. So it's difficult to add to what has been said. But I want to say something. Maybe I want to go back to the main question that this session is about, which is climate change and how does it impact the elderly people. The problem with older adults is that they are often on medication. Because they are older, their body temperature adjusts more slowly to extreme heat, extreme cold events. Sometimes their brain is not as, working as good as before. So if there is any emergency or issue, they need help to evacuate their house or something like that. Let's say if you have a flood. And also if you have an electricity shortage, sometimes it can be life-threatening because some of those elder people rely on electrical systems for their health, to solve their health issues. But you also have pollution. Pollution is bad for younger people, but it has even more impact on older people. Disease, virus, older people are more prone to basically catch those viruses, and the outcome from those viruses might be worse than for younger people. So why I'm saying that, because you all know that, is because with the climate change, which is basically a few things, extreme heat event, more disease, more flood or emergency situation, older people have more difficulty to basically adapt themselves, to adjust themselves. So it can be life-threatening. So the solution now, and I think some of the solutions that I want to discuss have been already explained. I believe in a partnership between the local government, which is basically the city, the district governments, the immediate community near where you live, and the innovators. Innovators on software, innovators on hardware that can actually help solve some of those issues. So, if the local governments, the communities, local communities, and the innovators work together, it will reduce the negative impact of climate change on the elderly population. I want to stress, because now we are in the age of AI and sending people to the moon or to Mars and everything, but we should not underestimate the power of communities. It might sound a bit old-fashioned, but communities are, to me, the most important thing we need to treasure to solve many, many social issues, especially for elderly people. Communities are more careful, smarter at taking care of local social issues, such as taking care of the elderly people. Ideally, and I see in China you are building some very nice buildings to take care of old age people, but as you said, it's expensive. Not everybody can afford to live there. And I think going forward, less and less people will be able to afford to live in those sophisticated old age home. People basically will need to stay where they live. And that's where the community will be so important to basically be a substitute for what those old age sophisticated homes provide at an expensive cost. That's what I want to say. I don't want to, maybe I want to leave time for question and answers. So, yeah, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. May I open the floor for any comments, questions, any observations? Please.
I think your presentation was very good, particularly the people and community and local institution, what they are doing, because within the community there are different kind of people, different classes of people. So now one question is that those are poorest of the poor, or those who are lonely, what kind of strategy, what kind of support they are providing or can provide. I want to.
You got the question? I can do it for you. He is mostly highlighting the issue of challenges of the marginalized people in the communities, like poorest of the poor and the poor people who are lonely or living lonely, for just highlighting their challenges and to some solutions or suggestions for them.
Yeah. Fortunately, I've never lived in or faced communities of this type, so I'm not maybe the best person to answer. But I think you're from Bangladesh, huh? So maybe you have more opportunities to deal with those communities. I think people who live alone and without resources need more those communities than anybody else. One thing that I noticed is to develop collective gardens. You know, in Japan, for instance, you have a lot of empty lands, and because you have more and more people, I mean, you have demographic decline. There are more and more houses that are demolished and replaced by basically empty lands. Some of these empty lands is turned into collective gardens. Either it's a municipal initiative or it's a private initiative. But in both cases, it's wonderful because people go there, help each one, help their little piece of the garden to grow some vegetable. They can share between themselves. It's very inexpensive. And psychologically, it's also nice because you meet people. Okay, and I give you the example of Japan, which is not a poor country. But I think this applies to any type of country. To give you an example, where did I find out that the power of communities is actually in India? I was in Pondicherry, which is a former French, not colony, but kind of comptoir. And when the French came there in the 15th or 16th century, there was a kingdom, the Chola kingdom. And when it came to water management, everything was basically controlled by the local communities. So when the French came, they learned from the local people how they were managing water. And it worked very, very well. So that shows the power of communities running things. But
Thank you very much. Yeah, briefly, please.
Yeah, thank you. My questions to Professor Shu. With your experience in Africa and many other countries, so you mentioned about the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. How is the elder population, the younger population, receiving the BRI projects now in respective countries? There are many challenges. Like a week ago, India, for example, was mentioning about Chinese water projects disturbing the region a lot, hydro projects. So many of our researchers are basically told to work on these environmental issues in Washington. So how do you see the younger people, the elder people now looking at the BRI? Have they improved, the processes? Thank you.
For BII, I think theoretically is quite a good planning and opportunities for the project implementers and also for the younger engineers and the students, because as you see, China has developed all of the water resources quite developed. But nowadays, these kind of young generation students, they came out gradually from the university and schools, they need jobs. and opportunities. So BRI projects, I think, provide local opportunities for these countries, but also for Chinese engineers. So it's quite important. And of course, there's also like these social impacts because we have to balance. China is a country with a centralized system, the political system. So we also, over the past like 20 years, because this BRI launching out since 2013, I think for the first 10 years, we learned a lot of lessons, good lessons, and also some bad lessons. And there's some impact to the local people, as I've seen in like even in African countries and neighboring countries. And even in your country, I visited, I discussed with some members from like think tankers. They think about like the capital track or money trap, you see, money trap, yeah, for these big projects. Because like these kind of larger projects in China, it's no problem. Like high express train, the highways, because we have a large population to cut down their cost because with the scale up. But like in some African countries, Ethiopia and Kenya, when I visited there, some projects invested by, and of course, implemented by China, some corporations. But these kind of projects, they're sometimes, too costly to the local economy. And also there's some, social interest balance. Because even when we recruit some engineers or the workers locally, sometimes we 500 staff from this village or township, but only maybe 50 from another one. So these kind of things, we must be very, very careful. Yes, I think so, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I take this up? No, we have run out of time. Very sorry about that. I hope you have to follow the timeline. One more? We can? One more? Yes, please. Yeah. Very briefly, please.
My name is Supaporn from Mahidol Oxford Tropical Medicine Research Unit. I'd like to ask Professor Thibault, about the shortage, the power shortage in May 2025 in the southern of France and Italy and other countries in Europe. What are the lessons we've learned, and is there any possibility for the resolutions on this situation to prevent damages in the future? Thank you.
Yeah, I was not in. I know what you're talking about, but I was not in France at that time, so I don't have too much information about that. Right now there is a heat wave in France, and it's very, very difficult for the elderly people. Those heat waves are putting a lot of stress on the electricity infrastructures. So yes, we could have more events like that. The risk is for hospitals. The risk is for nuclear power plants. So you're going to tell me nuclear power plants, hospitals are equipped with generators to basically take over from the electricity grid. But the reality is that those generators are not always well maintained and are not always working. So then it could actually be a disaster. So especially if you think about a disaster, generators not working with nuclear plants. But since the topic here is about elderly people, I think it's more about the hospital, the old age care, the access to air conditioning, because now we have 40 degrees in the south of France. 40 degrees, if you don't have air conditioning, it's quite tough. And most homes in France don't have air conditioning. So what we're going to see is early deaths. People are going to... The problem is that we don't have the data. We have AI and stuff like that, but we don't really have the data for early deaths. Somebody dies a few years earlier because of climate impact, we don't know. We don't really have very good statistics, so it's very difficult to measure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I also, may I propose that we conclude the session? Before I do that, once again, a big hand to both the presenters. Thank you very much. Also to those who joined by Zoom, and also many thanks to them. Really excellent. Thank you very much for your help. And also, may I also invite the
yes,
Portuguese
and of
guy?
course, let's give a round of applause to our moderator
thank you
here.
very
You did a great job. Thank you.